room, and we'll come back to order. Back into order, and we're on the consent, item 4.1. Let's see the items on the consent are moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Mayor. Anyone opposed? Motion. Oh, Jenna, thank you. Please go ahead, Director Sona.
Sorry, I was maybe gonna pull. No, that's all right. I'll bring it up at a later date. Sorry, thanks. I was gonna pull some meeting minutes, but I will wait for that. Thank you.
Okay. Everyone with us? Anyone opposed to moving the consent agenda? So moved. Business arising from the minutes. I don't believe there is any. Seeing none, committee reports and recommendations. 6.1 policy development and review committee meeting recommendations of March 11th. Okay. So we're looking for questions from the director. Mayor?
Just wondering, is it it mentions the terms of reference for the structure for the EAD and the PVIS. Well, one of the things that I talked about previously was terms of reference or roles and responsibilities of electoral area directors and municipal directors on the board. Is that going to be included in this?
Thank you. Through the chair, during that meeting, there was a discussion that was brought up, and that was going to be part of the priorities as well for the CAO to be working with the consultant to start reviewing sort of the roles and responsibilities and potential terms of reference for some of the committee and the board members, along with the other pieces that were outlined in the report.
Perfect, thank you.
Director Crompton.
I was surprised by this. I had always thought what we were loading into governance excellence initiatives was how we use the tools that we have rather than a broad review of all the tools and a whole bunch of more work for staff. Like I read a whole bunch of work to update policy rather than an effort by elected people to up our game as far as ensuring that we are staying at a strategy level rather than a tactical level. And I could see a process on the other side of this where staff go away and do a whole bunch of very good work updating policy, but our approach continues to be more tactical than strategic. And I feel like what I thought we were focused on with governance excellence was how we do our work as opposed to getting our staff to go away and do a whole bunch of updates to policy documents. I'm just wondering if there's a response from staff on my statements. That's my question. Is there a response to my statement?
Thank you, Jack, and I still to see Director Pettingill and Stoner, but I'd like staff to respond.
I'm happy to respond to that through the chair. The consultant that came through for an initial analysis of where we presently are included a survey through the board. And the consultant's response was remarkably high quality of governance excellence. The board's perspective was
Of ourselves.
of ourselves. And recommendation was through coaching and through some adjustments as CAO on how work is managed, and how, like the single staff model, those sort of things would be a good start. So instead of it being governance excellence project, it being excellence in governance all the time. As what we're doing, it's a verb. And then revisit after that to see if over auditing and over analysis would just be paralysis, or is some level of just changing how we work right now as an overall verb of excellence in governance, could that address most of the issues? Because the cost of a deep audit would be high, and based on the surveys, might not yield worthwhile results. Now, the question would be if the survey, if you're surprised that the survey had good results, that could be another discussion.
Follow-up, yes. That makes sense.
That does make sense. This came out of a scenario where we looked at all of the motions that this board had made to add 70 different outstanding directions to staff to do work that we just had zero capacity to ever accomplish, that were way old. And so I'm concerned that resulted in an additional list of work to add to that pile for you to go away and update policies, rather than some work for us to come to terms with exactly as you've said. So your response to how do you feel about a whole bunch more work sounds to me to be, we're going to single staff model, we're going to try and hone this in, but you didn't. I guess I'm wondering, how do you feel about all the work we've asked you to do, or that you've proposed here to update policies? Do you have capacity for that? It seems to me like this is more work added to the 70 pieces of fuel that we had in the hopper.
I think we're not doing our job if we don't do some of that work listed. EAD requires a terms of reference, in my perspective. It doesn't have one.
Okay.
And through that work, I think a lot of the roadblocks will be addressed. So although there might not be a per se job description for EADs, there will be that written into the terms of reference, some guidance, some guidance comments. You're right. We just basically proposed a whole bunch more work. I would say that in that model of workload, there's your projects, there's tasks that just come up that you don't expect, but you plan for the unexpected. And then there should always be iterative change, iterative improvements to our bylaws. The primary bylaw hasn't been looked at, I think, in 10 years. It might be around that.
Yeah, through the chair, it has gone through iterative small changes as required through legislation, but it hasn't gone through a really comprehensive review for about 7 years. So there is an opportunity, and on corporate's work plan to always have that and reviewing it on a regular basis. Ideally, because it is a bit dated, we do a review as a first step, and then we're looking at it yearly. So there's small little tweaks that may be required to ensure the efficiency of the meetings, which also helps support governance as well from a more micro level.
So this kind of should be happening all the time, and we need to build capacity in for it.
I have Director Pettingill and Director Stoner and Director. Yeah.
So, thank you, Chair. My understanding of the discussion, I had the same questions, I think, as Director Crompton and Demare, was that the procedure bylaw review, one of the reasons why it had a longer timeline was it was going to provide or require that we have those discussions kind of upfront, and then we could start getting in, these policies would sort of enshrine what we discover. And so I had understood that some of those discussions about roles and so on, and our sort of how we conduct ourselves as a board, that starts this procedure bylaw review process. We had that discussion, then the policy falls out of that. So that is my hope. But I think if we're moving forward with this without doing that, I'm not so comfortable with the direction then, but what I understand is we are doing this as a first step.
Through the chair, yes, you're exactly right. The procedures bylaw, if done in the way that has been planned, it is interactive, it is using board vision and the board's legacy of how these changes will take place and how it'll be outlined to be a more effective and governing body. So it's almost marrying that conversation and analysis into a legacy.
Director Stoner.
Yeah, CAO Paul articulated a lot of what I was gonna say in response to Director Compton, which is really like a yes and. Part of it, I think, is going to require ongoing due diligence from those of us around this current board table to make sure that we are judicious about what we're adding to that list. But without clarity for things like our procedures bylaw, which hasn't been updated in 8 years, or terms of reference for our committees, it makes it really difficult to make those changes last across different boards and clarify for staff and for the governing body how that actually works term to term as opposed to just within a term. And so I think that's why the committee felt like it was important to continue to prioritize this work, as Director Pangale said, to have those conversations and then kind of inform that as the policy direction going forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I've been enjoying the conversation, like thinking on this as evolving as we go here, but I think understanding as this goes and you know, I don't see an output of this, like 6 months is the shortest timeline, I think, on this is like how we this table absorbs this work and whatever changes that need to be made through how we're interacting with these policies. So I guess that's like optimistic about the impact that this can have, and I appreciate the rationale for what's presented here, but just seeing where, you know, what that looks like, whether that's, you know, just in time learning for us as we're rolling out or approving new policies, or like giving some space for this group to really and those policies to have that impact with this group. So that's a next step, but I'm comfortable with where we are. But has that been contemplated? I know that's not like laid out explicitly here, but is that how we've been contemplating getting those changes communicated to the board and the community at large? It turned into a question. My ranting did turn into a question at the end.
No, through the chair. And now that we have the resolution and sort of the approval of the plan, we can now put together a bit of a project charter. And I know one of the questions of the committee is, wow, 1 year seems like a very long time in which to do this project. But the idea around it is to have engagement of the board. So probably choosing a cow meeting where we can have that type of engagement and we can embed specific values of the board around, you know, innovation, efficiency, accountability, leadership, transparency. What are the types of values that we're wanting to bake into a procedures bylaw? Well, it seems very dry and legislative required, but I think there are some opportunities to ensure that those types of values are embedded into it so that, as Director Stoner had mentioned, there is an opportunity for the procedures bylaw to guide how the board comes together and makes decisions that speak to those values. So that's why, you know, we've got this an SLRD engagement policy. It's an opportunity to use that new policy as well when we're engaging in this work. So while it's going to take a little bit longer, the idea is that it will help support that greater goal of governance moving forward. I hope that answered the question.
Great answer. Thank you.
Excellent. Yes. Would someone like to move that the prioritized list of governance excellence initiatives be approved as presented,
So moved.
et cetera? Okay, thank
Second.
you. Director Demare, Director Herford, Jack, yes?
That was satisfying for me. I do want to say that if, as staff do this work, they see policy work that may not be required, that they feel confident to come back to this table and say, we've decided to not fall through on one or the other because it is unrequired, and I really like the idea of it's matched with this learning as a board. There are pieces of it that I perceive are opportunities for downloading, like conflict of interest to me is something the province has set out and that exists, and code of conduct, oftentimes we as municipalities are incorporating a lot of work that the province has already done for us. So as you do this work, it seems to me that if the focus is on upping our performance and our excellence, rather than doing work that's already done by others, I would, I'd be even more enthusiastic in my yes vote that is going to be coming shortly. As soon as you call the question, I'll be voting.
Call the question. Thank you. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carried. My goal is that we never get to have terms of reference for the EAD.
You should have voted no then.
One thing at a time. Electoral Area Directors Committee recommendations of March 12th, 2024. 2.1, Director Mack is moving.
I move all
All of them.
for that.
Excellent. Is there any opposition or a seconder? Director Demare.
Sorry, where are we?
We're
6.21.
And there's 4.
You're at 13:55 after school.
Yeah.
You are at 13:55, just so you all know.
Is that like an automatic?
I don't know.
Is that gonna mind your bell off when you got?
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's where I am. Thank you.
You're not.
I see Suzanne and Colin here. Welcome, and sorry, a little disruption in the corner there.
As always.
We're talking about the EAD committee recommendations, as you know, from March 12th. And we've had a motion to approve all 4 of them, seconded. And so it's time for questions or comments. I'm seeing none. Call the question. Motion carries. That's it. Thank you. Now we're moving on to 6.3, Pemberton Valley Utilities and Services Committee, recommendations of March 14th, 2024.
Sorry.
Did I skip one? Too efficient. Information report. The electoral area directors. No. Is that right?
Yeah.
Draft budgets. Okay. So cost centers. 7 cost centers here. Director Mack is
I will move that.
moving them.
Second.
Director
I
Mayor.
have some questions
Seconding.
first.
Okay, yes, please. We've got staff here. Go ahead, Director Crompton.
I thought we were fee for service on building, but it says in the report that we will adjust our building department requisition. Maybe I've just misunderstood how the building permit works in the regional district. Does that make sense? We've
We
adjusted our, go ahead.
Sorry, through the chair, Suzanne LaFrance, Director of Finance. So for building permit revenue, it's not the 100, we still have the taxation portion to cover 100% of that cost center. So it's not 100% fee for service. At this point, we still have a requisition and we still have the permitting revenues. The requisition is slowly declining though. So it is becoming more of a fee for service. And I'm not sure exactly where you're reading the information. You said that it was all fee for service, but it's a mix.
No, sorry, you're right, I didn't read that it's all fee for service. That makes sense to me. So in a regional district, you could have a huge amount of revenue in your permitting that came from one electoral area. Is that fair to say? And then this sort of revenue excess that we currently are experiencing would be shared throughout the rest of the regional district. Is that an accurate way of understanding it?
So building inspections is just the electoral areas that provides the requisition fee. So that's spread out between everybody based on the rate per thousand. And then the fees that we receive is based on application based, but it's all contained in that cost center. So any surplus is just moved into the next year as revenue, and there's no redivision of that. It's set for the next year of revenue.
It just
So
seems to-
there's not a division between each area.
But it seems to me that we have a very sort of there could be huge amounts of building inspections in area C for a couple years, and then there'd be a big surplus, and then the next year that would be money that would be spent in another electoral area, and that's just a reality of regional district budgeting that is very different than the water service, which is very much money stays within that service and can't move beyond that service. With building permits, it can move throughout the regional district.
No. It all stays within that service.
I understand that, but it's building permits are, the building permitting is across the electoral areas.
Yes. It's fee for service. So yeah, it
So the
depends on
surplus
who
is
needs,
shared.
sorry, if I can just try to explain. It depends on who needs the building inspection, right? So they apply. It doesn't matter if it's area A, B, or C, or D. They apply if they need it. Then the inspections are provided and we charge the fee. The requisition is totally separate, and it's all areas pay into this requisition because all areas have the ability to apply for a permit. So the service is for all areas.
Yes.
The revenue stays within that service. The building inspection revenue obviously fluctuates year over year depending on who needs building inspections. So that's why when we budgeted, it's the average of the last 5 years, because there's not a guarantee that it's going to increase one year. It's going to be all over the place. There's no way to estimate that.
But yes, you're right, Jen.
The surplus is shared. Yeah, thank you.
It's not shared throughout different services though. It's remaining in building inspection service. Yeah.
That was my point. It is, yeah,
Well,
we understand each other.
Okay.
Director Pettingill and Director Mayor.
Yeah, I may repeat myself on this a bit today. And this is maybe a conversation or a flag for next year, but just with the experience we had with emergency response, it seemed to me, and maybe I'm mistaken here, but select funds ended up being some degree of an important part of our emergency response. And with everything, I'm just wondering, if we're paying enough attention to that in select funds or how we're using them throughout the year and so on. And so maybe this is leading to a bigger question of, how are we planning to respond to emergency, and do we have the right funds set apart somewhere to do that? Again, it seemed like there was a reliance on select funds to do that, and so should that be built in, or and again, maybe that's not a question to be answered right now and to think about for next year, but it's something I thought about when I was looking through these budgets.
Thank you. Director Mayor,
no,
would staff like to respond to that now or just bring forward thoughts? Okay,
I can respond to that if that's all right.
please.
So yeah, select funds weren't required for the emergency planning portion. It was a community support that Sal provided through his select funds for people that had to receive the hazard assessments. So it was just a community benefit that Sal wanted to provide, and it's not a requirement of emergency planning.
Yeah, and for clarity, I think that's my point. I've been lumping in my mind, maybe incorrectly, but the whole, not just planning, but response into the emergency planning title. But as you say, this was required to support people. I don't think, unfortunately, we're going to avoid big emergencies in future years. And so whether it's through select funds or other mechanisms, have we set up, you know, so that the next group that needs the money's there, whether it's from a select fund or wherever, are we starting to plan for that? Cause it seems like we're gonna have to start to plan for that, so. And that's not a question for today, to answer today, maybe it's for us to.
Director Demare.
I hear what you're saying, and I have to agree with you, because the provincial government has not stepped up to the table with any funding really for the Dalton Lake wildfire affected properties. So I've committed $95,000 to the hazard assessments, because I wanted the reason why was to get the job done as fast as possible. And as we see now, we're 6 months later and we're still, most of the properties haven't got their assessments done because of that riparian area assessment issue that we've had. So that's why that is, but somewhere in our advocacy, we need to try to get some funding for these disasters for these people. One of the big issues is the uninsured. You don't fund anything for the uninsured. And United Way will fund, and Red Cross will fund some for the full-time property owners. It's an issue across BC, not just our area. Thank you.
Through the chair, just further to what Director Demare is saying, the province is prioritizing primary homeowners as opposed to secondary homeowners. I feel like the infrastructure, the impact of the last wildfires is really forcing their hands on that decision. So we are seeing the province coming forward to support primary homeowners and secondary homeowners. So that's a consideration, you know, are we following that same, or are we going to follow that same policy or that same path? Or are we going to expand it to part-time or secondary homeowners? One thing to flag, which is what Director Demare was saying, is that a choice of the secondary homeowners to not do something can have a critical impact on the environment. And so with the province not supporting secondary homeowners, it could lead to disastrous effects on the water and the land. So that kind of, you can understand why the province made that decision, but then you can see the overall impact on the environment if then secondary homeowners who aren't insured choose to get that.
I believe we moved and seconded that one. Call the question. Is anyone opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. I think we have to stop there for lunch. 12:30 on the nose. For a presentation at 1 o'clock. So we'll resume at 1. Thank you.
Good job.
Our meeting, and we're talking about Catalina Creek debris flow mitigation project. And welcome Jerry Young here. Thank you for being here. And also on the screen, we have Mike Strain, the project consultant. Here you are. Welcome. And I will turn it over to staff. And Allie, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. So just briefly, introductions for the folks in the room, and then I'll pass over to Mike Strain, who's going to be speaking for you today. Philippa Campbell, Project and Program Coordinator.
And Ali Chappell, Project Manager for SLRD.
And if you're happy to turn it over to Mike to step into the presentation.
All right, thanks, Philippa. As Philippa said, I'm Mike Strain, Senior Project Manager with CapEx Projects, and here to talk to you today about the Catalina Creek Debris Flow Mitigation Project. If we can go to the next slide, please. So here's the presentation agenda. So we'll go through a high-level overview, touching briefly on project governance structure, location of the project, and project objective. And then we'll dive more into detail and provide updates on the project budget, costs, funding, project scope, schedule, risks, and next steps. Before we get into these details, I just wanted to mention a couple of items for context. So the first is to point out where we are with the project, what phase we're in. So we're currently in the design phase, and we're between the 50 and 90% design completion, and we're approaching the 90% design submission in the next couple of weeks. So just something to keep in mind as we move into discussing the cost estimates. The other point to mention is that the ICIP Green Artem grant has recently been approved and announced by the provincial and federal governments. This is good news for the project and represents a contribution towards the project of up to 5.7 million. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick reminder with regards to the project governance. The SLRD board sits at the top, with the steering committee reporting directly to the board via the project sponsor. The steering committee is made up of 5 SLRD staff who are voting members, plus the president of Lillooet Lake Estates, who is acting in an important advisory role. The steering committee meets monthly within the scope of direction provided by the SLRD board and is responsible for overseeing the project and providing overall direction and key operational decision for the project with regards to scope, schedule, budget, procurement, and communications. Steering committee is accountable to the SLRD board for the successful delivery of the project within the schedule and budget assigned. Next slide, please. So I think we all know where the project is. It's located on the north side of Lillooet Lake in the traditional territory of Lillooet Nation, with the creek passing through Crown land and land owned by LLE. We're working with Lillooet as right holders of the land. Next page, please. The project scope is to design, construct, and establish operation and maintenance of a debris flow mitigation structure for the Cataline Creek at Lillooet Lake Estates. The objective is to reduce the risk to the community and potential for loss of life by increasing the capacity of the existing channel to manage future debris flows up to 100,000 cubic meters through the community under a new Forest Service Road bridge and into Lillooet Lake. The 100,000 cubic meters represents a debris flow event with a 1,000-year return period. Next slide, please. So project budget versus cost. So the current approved budget is 8.1 million and the current cost estimate is 12.9 million. Current budget of 8.1 million is based on the 2022 update of the 2016 preliminary design cost estimate, which was used to apply for grant funding. The 50% design estimate of 12.9 million is the most recent estimate to complete the project. There are several reasons for the increase from the preliminary design estimate to the 50% design, with the biggest contributors being escalation has been higher than what was assumed in 2022. Preliminary design assumed disposal near Cataline Creek off the Forest Service Road, and this is no longer an option. Preliminary design cost estimate assumed construction over 1 year, and the 50% estimate assumed over 2 years. So it is clear that the project will need to find ways to reduce costs moving forward, and it will also need an increase to the approved budget. Significant effort by the project management and engineering team has already gone into optimizing the design and finding ways to reduce construction costs moving forward, and we anticipate our next cost estimate to be submitted in the next couple of weeks, and we anticipate that it will show a significant reduction as a result of these efforts. Some of these efforts include engaging a contractor to complete a constructability review and second cost estimate check to validate costs and provide potential cost savings measures. The engineering team has also modified the design to reduce the excavated volumes and increase the volume of fill to remain on site by steepening the side slopes of the channel and increasing the size of the berms. The project team is continuing to work with the ministry to maximize the use of fill sites on the Forest Service Road that are as close to the project site as possible. Next slide, please. Now that the ICIP Green Artem funding has been approved, and with the CEPF and the LLE loan authorization in place, the current available funds for the project are up to 11.7 million, approximately. As it stands, the current cost estimate exceeds available funding, and recognizing the importance to keep the community loan as low as possible, we are looking for every opportunity to reduce costs, as discussed on the last slide, but are also looking at potential ways to increase the funding. We had applied for the DMAF grant as a contingency in case the ICIP funding was not approved. Since we were successful with the ICIP grant, it is not likely that we will be successful with this grant, since they're both federal grants and they don't allow stacking. However, we are working with the grant administration to explore potential other creative ways to increase funding. Another option could be a future intake for CEPF, being that the 2 million grant previously awarded through CEPF was only for a portion of the works. The project may be able to apply for additional grant funds for the balance of the works. Next slide, please. So this is a high-level overview of the preliminary and 50% design scope. I believe you've seen this slide before. Please note the locations and dimensions are not exact. The project includes approximately 900 meters of creek excavation, 970 meters of training berms to contain future debris flows and redirect them towards the creek channel so they can be conveyed through to the lake. The project also includes coordination with the Ministry of Forests for the replacement of the existing Forest Service Road bridge to suit the new creek dimension. On the next slide, we will see the changes to the project scope. So here we can see some of the changes that are being worked on following our 50% design in November. Again, locations and dimensions are not exact. The main channel has been redesigned with steeper side slopes to reduce the volume of excavation required. And as a result, additional berms were added near the FSR as a result of that steepening side slopes. Additional berms were added near the Forest Service Road, and some of the existing berms have been increased in size to accommodate more fill on site and reduce costs associated with hauling the fill off site. And an additional diversion channel was added upstream of the upper right berm. So that's looking downstream, like that's shown in pink. This is to avoid having to clear and regrade the entire area between the upper right berm and the main channel, which the engineer had previously thought was going to be necessary. It was also determined that the excavation into the lake would be much more limited than originally anticipated, which is another significant cost savings. Next slide, please. So project schedule. So since the last update to the board at the end of October, that's the sort of the gray shaded area there. We've received the 50% design and cost estimate and have made application for Crown land tenure, as well as environmental permits and approvals through the province and DFO. We've been notified by DFO that an authorization will be required, which is a more comprehensive submittal and review process with additional costs. That's more comprehensive than the notification process. And we're currently working to understand how this will impact our schedule. As a result of the costs exceeding both the project budget and available funding, additional efforts have been required to optimize the design and lower construction costs. And this has extended our design schedule by roughly a month. We were also delayed in receiving the ICIP funding announcement, which was originally anticipated in September of 2023. This delay, combined with delays in design, have prevented the project from moving forward as planned in the spring and required us to take another look at the construction schedule. Previously, we showed construction in 2 phases, with phase 1 starting in 2024 and phase 2 in 2025, and have determined that it would be achievable to complete the construction in approximately 1 year. And we are now planning to start construction later in the year and finish and keep the finish date at the end of 2025. We've also engaged a contractor through our engineers, Kerwood Lydell, to complete a constructability review process where they will provide a second estimate, a construction schedule, and comments on the project to consider for completion of design and tender. We anticipate this process will give the project greater certainty of anticipated costs and schedule before going out with the construction tender later this summer, and is expected to yield further potential cost savings measures. We are currently working with Lillooet Nation through their referral process, and will be looking to work with them further on the archaeological assessment and environmental monitoring. We're also working with the various ministries of the province to coordinate permits and Crown land tenure requirements, working with the Ministry of Forest to coordinate the bridge design with Kerwood Lydell, and to identify dump sites for surplus excavated material. And we are working with LLE on a regular basis on the details of the project, with a focus on impacts to land and requirements for the statutory right-of-way. Next slide, please. Here we see the top 5 risks that were identified by the project team in May. While we have been able to reduce risk in some of these areas, there are many areas where risk still exists. So with regards to item number 1, we've taken steps to mitigate risks of delays in obtaining permits and approvals by submitting applications as early as possible, and continue to work with the approving authorities to ensure permits and approvals will be complete on time. Our biggest outstanding risk in this area that we are working to understand is the impact from the DFO authorization. Item number 2, finalizing the stat right-of-way in time for construction. This is an area that we will continue to be focused on as a prerequisite for construction. Item number 3 is no longer a risk now that ICIP grant has been confirmed and announced by the province and the feds. Item number 4, upward pressure on costs. Although we have taken some measures to reduce the impacts here, there are a few items that we are continuing to monitor and manage related to land, completion of design, and construction. Item number 5, schedule delays. While the construction completion date hasn't changed, the risk of schedule delays remains. Our biggest outstanding risk here is related to securing land interests and permit approvals in a timely manner. Next slide, please. So our next steps include 90% design completion at the beginning of April, DMA permit application to be submitted following the completion of 90% design. We've engaged Lillooet Nation for the completion of a preliminary archaeological assessment and expect it will be complete in May. The construction review is in progress and will be complete in parallel to the design, with design completion by the end of May. We anticipate finalizing the stat right-of-way also by the end of May. Once the stat right-of-way is sorted and the design is complete and within budget, we'll be looking to issue a call for construction tenders. We anticipate construction would commence in the fall and be complete by the end of 2025. Next slide, please. So in the coming months, we anticipate the board will consider staff recommendations on the following matters. Approval to extend the engineering prime consultants agreement into the construction phase. We'll look for board approval of the statutory right-of-way prior to construction tender issuance. Following design and construction cost estimates, we will require approval for a revised budget. Approval in advance of issuing a call for tenders to initiate the construction services procurement process. And approval for award of construction services. Next slide. So that concludes my presentation for today. If there's any questions, happy to take them.
Questions from the board?
Yeah, thanks. Just wondering if any of the things we're doing to bring down the capital costs, risk increasing the operations and maintenance down the road, and if so, how we're balancing those competing things?
I'm not sure I can answer that. I haven't seen any cost increase as a result of our cost savings measures. I haven't seen any cost increases to the operations and maintenance, but that's something we can look into further, certainly with the engineers as this design progresses.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Going to Z, that's presentation, yes. Made by Director Hopwell, seconded by Director Finner. Any objections, any opposed? Seeing none. Approved, motion for our presentation received. Thank you. Thank you. Very well done, thank you. Now we're moving over to 6.2.3 Bolton Creek. Operators residence, a zoning amendment. First reading on the referrals. Let's get there. Director Mack.
Yeah, I would move that staff's report.
Seconded by. Oh, wait, what does that say? First of all, I have to remember your name. Seconded by Jesse Morden. Sorry. And questions, yes.
So this is not temporary, and that 30 years is not temporary. But the structures are very much temporary structures. Do we have any concern about that?
For the chair, I'm just getting Kim so that she can answer it, probably they're more thorough to me and then me. It's funny, the definition of temporary has come up a few times in the last little bit. They're on their way. I think she'll be able to mention that I would the legislation of what temporary is. But if there's any other questions, I might get them.
Do other directors have other questions or comments? While we wait for Kim. Yep, Director Pettingill.
Yeah, it just sort of, on a bit of a similar lines, but are we sort of, if this is worker housing, do we want to relate it to employment near where the housing is in some way or on the same property? Or as I read it, this could house workers who are working anywhere. It seemed to, I'm not sure.
There's two questions.
Welcome. Thanks, Mr. Boulder Creek. And Jack, do you want to repeat your question?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for the report. That was thorough. And one of the questions I have is around the use of what will not be temporary structures, but it seems as though they are temporary in form. And is that normal where we would zone something and allow for what I would typically think of as a temporary use for these long-term uses?
Yes.
Or would we require higher design standards and something?
Thank you. So through the chair, we, this, to step back a minute, this, zoning amendment application is coming forward, largely in reflecting the Crown Land tenure application that's also being submitted to the Ministry of Forests, which is for this much longer time period than we can accommodate through the current zoning, which is just for a temporary work camp. So thus the need for a zoning amendment. In terms of the actual physical structure of the employee housing, that is typical of the location that we are seeing these, this employee housing being located. Trying to think of other examples. We do have examples, say in the backcountry commercial or backcountry retreat zones where we have employee housing, and it is still in sort of temporary type structures, just given the remoteness of the location and the difficulty to get trades in to build more substantial housing.
So would we allow for, and maybe we already have, but my recollection of what we did at Tyax was very permanent. No, am I wrong? Like more of a design standard like we would see closer to a, like in a municipality.
Yeah, I think you're referring to the building that went up at times. That was more of a small apartment building. These are more, you know, staff housing. It's a very remote area. The Tyax employee housing is in a neighborhood at the end of Tilton Lake Road. So it's a slightly different situation.
One final question, Chair. If we received an application like this for Tyax, would we treat it similarly?
I think given that Tyax is in a neighborhood where it's going to be more visible, there are a lot of people that live in that area. You know, it has a higher design standard.
Sure.
But this is very remote. Yeah.
Thank you.
And through the chair, one thing I would like to add that isn't stated in the report, there's the context maps, but in terms of just speaking to that remoteness, this is about 75 kilometers from the village of Pemberton, about 45 kilometers down the FSR. So the Upper Lillooet FSR.
Thanks.
Director Pettingill had a question?
Yeah, just sort of wondering, I didn't notice any conditions around where the employers or employees work. It would sort of seem that there'd be some expectation that this is for nearby employment. So just some understanding of why that wouldn't be there or. Yeah.
Sure, thank you. So through the chair, under permitted uses, and I will note that the employee housing definition is being proposed to be added to the electoral area C zoning bylaw as part of this zoning amendment bylaw. As currently we don't have an employee housing definition in area C. And then under permitted uses in the RR8 zone, which is the new site specific zone, we state employee housing and then comma associated with the Boulder Creek and Upper Lillooet River hydroelectric facilities. And so that's a typical approach we've used in other areas in say area D where we have employee housing, but it is meant to be specifically limited to that employment. So in this case, it's the hydroelectric facilities. Sometimes we see it at a retreat center or sometimes we see it at a campground.
Director Berger?
Thank you.
All right, Director Mack?
Yeah, I think the thing to understand is there's the two power projects up there. And the people that are in there working, maintaining those two projects. Once you're in there, it's not such a great distance from this to either one, right? So I think they've kind of, from my mind, from what I've seen where the camp was before, it kind of splits the difference. So they can go from one to the other. So I think it's a rather convenient layout for accessing either one of the projects. I mean, obviously, they're gonna be there. I think there's a 40-year lifespan at least, right, on those projects. So.
Thank you.
Just comments. I'd say I trust your professional opinion, so I'll vote in favor of it. It seems to me that if a report had come forward too saying there's permanence here, and so we want to see it addressed through built form, I would be supporting that as well. This 40-year lifespan of this place, livability for the residents who will be there for a very long time seems somewhat valued. I think about the stuff at Bridge 2, like those buildings that are all built there seem when you visit them to be have some level of permanence to them more so, and that is something that seemed attractive to me, but the remoteness does make sense, so I'll support it. Thanks for reporting.
Dr. Matt.
Yeah, just to answer that, I think you have to understand, like Bridge 2, they have families living there.
Yeah.
This isn't a case. This is just, I think there's 4 or 5 workers there, and they're in there on a 2-week in, 2-week out basis. However that works, they change shifts. So it's a little different setup. And like I said, Bridge 2, you can drive in and out of there. Yeah, that's a different setup. This is remote. I think you have to understand that. I think we should go on a tour up there one day and actually have a look at the layout, because it's quite interesting, actually.
See some birds.
Go birding.
Dr. Pettingill.
Yeah, I think I will, we've had this moved, right? Or we're,
Yeah,
I don't think we have it moved, no.
yeah, it was moved by,
Sorry, yes, we
okay,
have.
so I think I'm likely going to vote against this. I would probably need a bit more info to feel comfortable, just in terms of, I take the points of remoteness. But when I think about deconstructibility and the idea that this is meant to be there for the longer term, and thinking about what I hope, even if workers are in and out, some I guess quality of the structures and yeah, I'm just not quite there yet on this.
Thank you. Call the question on this, are people ready to vote, or? Yes? I'm ready, all in favor? 2, 3, 4. Okay, and opposed? Just the one, reported, Director Pettingill, opposed, motion carried, thank you. Thank you, staff. Okay. The next item, Pemberton Valley Utilities and Services Committee recommendations of March 14th, 2024.
Moved.
And we, thank you, Suzanne or?
I'll second it.
And seconded by Director Matt.
You can have a full report if you like. It's up to you.
No, I think, and I did consult with staff, and the entire board does vote on this, so it's moved and seconded, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried, it's as easy as that. Thank you. Bylaws. Angela, please, yes.
Good afternoon, Angela Belsham, Director of Legislative and Corporate Services. The purpose of bylaw number 508, 1993, Amendment 1834, 2023 is to increase the maximum annual requisition limit to cover anticipated increased costs associated with the operation of the Lillooet landfill. In order for the new maximum annual requisition limit to be available for 2024, if needed, The bylaw must be adopted prior to the SLRD's financial plan adoption, which is expected to occur later today or tomorrow. Staff's recommendation is to proceed with the adoption of the bylaw at this time, which was based on obtaining the required participating consents, which were received from Area A and B, as well as inspector approval, which was received on February 23rd. Thank you.
Go ahead, Rafa.
So obviously I took this to council where it was not supported. So I kind of find myself in between a rock and a hard spot. Having said that, we don't have a choice. And I think that we do need to move forward with this, but I will continue to look at alternative ideas. Should we not find a suitable person to run this? So yes, I'm still working on this and I will support this here, but know that it was not supported at Lillooet just because it was not. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded, and Jack?
Question, so we don't require Lillooet's approval?
2/3. 2/3 required. And so little area A and little area B have a vote. And big Lillooet.
That's
A vote.
That's right.
That's how the service establishment is set up.
And if I can just add to that, area A and B were voted here before it went to Lillooet. So it really was not for anything that it needed to go to Lillooet except for procedural.
And one of your counselors strongly objected to that.
Strongly, yes.
It's already 2/3 decided. Like,
Yeah.
how to hit the table. Having said that, democracy proceeds. Call the question? Anyone opposed? Motion is carried. 7.2 is a request for a decision on 2024 parcel tax bylaws. For Suzanne and Colin are both here on the screen.
So this,
Each one we'd have to do individually.
I don't think so, so we can do them all together.
Even with them being in different areas.
I'm looking at Angela, yes, yes, we can do them all together, but I cut off Colin, excuse me, Mr. Hodgkins, go ahead if you wanted to say something.
I was just gonna give a quick summary overview of them, but that's fine. We can continue for the sake of time.
Would you like the review? I've got a yes and a no on the review and also. Okay, we're gonna do the 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's talk about the first 5. Because after that, we need a 2/3 majority vote. So just looking at the first 5. Comments or questions, you'd like to move those, Director Matt?
Yes, I'll second.
Seconded by Director Crompton. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carried. And then 2/3 majority vote required for 1, 2, 3, 4. The next 5. Moved by Director Crompton, seconded by Director Moore. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, the motion carried. Thank you. Now we're looking at regional budget changes and detail of the 2024, 20 to 2028 financial plan.
Okay, I have just a quick presentation, just going over that information report on the changes that were made since the last board meeting, actually the last COW meeting in February. So I'll just quickly share my screen and just go over that report.
Thank you.
Okay. So overall, the regional budgets, sorry, is my screen showing up? I should check.
Yes, it
okay.
is. Yeah.
So overall, the 2024 requisitions for the regional budgets, which all or most members participate in. I say most because Regional Growth Strategy Area A doesn't participate in, and Sea to Sky Trails just is the lower southern areas that participate in them. Overall, it's a 19.5% increase over last year's requisition amount. So it's an additional 590,000 that we're requisitioning this year. The estimated residential tax rate is increased to, it's basically 6 cents per thousand. And $1 million property would pay approximately $65 for these regional services. I laid out the each area's increases in or decreases. The updated 2023 forecast figures are included. And that just as little items come across, I've been updating these figures. It's kind of a long, a lot of work involved to keep these updated. And then for the changes for general government, we received the actual BC Hydro PILT revenue amount, which is received as 5.37% of an increase. So what that means is the increase up to 4% is still being distributed to the Area A, Area B, and District of Lillooet, and District of Squamish and Area D PILT funds that were set up through the policy. The remaining 1.37% of the increase is withheld in general government. So there is a little bit of an increase to the revenue available in general government. And that will change in 2026 when, as per the policy, these Area A, B, and D PILT reserves reached 37.5% of the total amount based on the policy. It's kind of confusing to explain just via discussions and words, but it's laid out in the policy. There's also an updated local government climate action program revenue for 2024. They decided to pre-fund 3 years. So we received 3 years of funding just last week. So that's added in, and the letter also received is attached. There was also some changes from transfers from reserves and for board resolutions for new grant funding. So I've added these mostly from, community works funds and also from the PILT reserve. And these are both held, these reserves are all held in general government. There's increased time allocation revenue for 2024 from 20,000 to 95,000, because when I was reviewing the 2024 financials, it already was at 25,000 for January to February. So there's a lot of time that general government staff is doing on other services. I reduced the board computer expense to 4,000, and I kept it at 8,000 for 2026, just to go with the election cycle. So there was just a small savings there. I removed the SLRD jackets because that program has kind of stalled for many, many years. And I've kept it back in 2025, but we'll see what happens with this program. We haven't had the SLRD jackets for a while. So those are also small savings. And then I reduced the short-term interest because I looked at the 2024 interest, and they are coming in much lower this year than last year. Not much lower, but there is a significant amount lower. So I reduced that 5,000. So there was some savings that I found within the general government budget. And the land planning and zoning, I updated the LG cap funding to be about 80,000. And I'm looking also for offsetting the 80% of the 20% gap between the grant, which is only 80%. So I added 16,000 as a potential for grant funding as we search for additional grant funds. I think that we can definitely find some grant funding for the electrification of the vehicles. There's lots of programs available. And we're looking at that now. And I added the 20K for development projects. So this is the Furry Creek and the Britannia Beach development projects that ongoing consultation are still going to be needed for, as per recommended by the Director of Planning, Kim Needham. And there were no other significant changes to the regional budgets. And the full detailed financial plan is also included for the board's information, because the board really is approving this in the next bylaw, in the next section of the agenda. So I'll just open it up to questions at this point, and yeah.
Thank you, Mr. LaFrance. Questions? Yes, Director Pettigill.
I have just a couple of broad ones. And this first one's maybe an ask for next year, but is there any way with the software we have to understand the mean and median across for a $1 million parcel or $1 million assessment across the regional district? And where I'm trying to get at here is, I understand a given property may have a very specific set of service areas that apply. And people get their tax bills, so some software knows how to figure that out. But are we able to sort of capture the median? Because it's interesting to look at the general tax area and how that applies to everyone. But when you start to consider all the different permutations that go in, like a mean and median sort of thing might give me some sense of what's the actual tax impact we're having on people. Is that something that would be at all feasible, or is that's just not?
There isn't any software that we have at this time. We do have a building and planning software that has assessments within it, but I don't believe they've been updated. So the only place we get assessments is via online. So it's spreadsheets right now. So it would have to be a lot of spreadsheet analysis to do that. And I don't know how valuable that information would be, because it's so varied. Area B, we can get the average, say for the Lillooet Fire Protection, which is a very small area, the average is only about 80,000 for a single family residence. And then you go to the south and it's just drastically different. So I think within each community might be beneficial to eventually look at finding that average median residential value, but we haven't been looking into that for the full SLRD.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's just trying to find ways to wrap my head around all the different permutations in here. Now, one of the other things I saw is often in the narrative, we talk about tax impact per million, but in the tables, it's tax impact per 1,000 or 500,000. And I'm just wondering if there's a reason for that difference, or am I misunderstanding that's actually not the same number in those two places?
Yeah, it's exactly as you were kind of describing. There's different medians for each community. So I reduce it from 1,000 to 500 for a lot of the services within the actual detailed financial plan.
Okay, and that's the reason okay, thank you. And then I guess the last thing, I was curious about the time allocated to other services, specifically in related to the amount of time that was dedicated to emergency response over the last year. Is that what that is, or that's sort of every case where services go somewhere else? And I guess the other piece of that question is there a line or a way we were able to track sort of dollar wise how much service flowed into EOC from other departments?
Definitely. So they're all through two different sets of timesheets. When there's an EOC time, we have our manual timesheets that we send to the task, and we have our internal timesheets that are always filled out by each staff and approved by the manager. So yes, we can definitely track the time allocated to EOC. It's moved manually to the emergency planning service because that's where the revenue will be received, versus trying to spread out the EMBC revenue to all the different cost centers. We move that time allocation revenue time allocation expense as overtime into emergency planning. So all overtime on EOC response work is 100% redeemed by the task.
Okay, thank you. And you know, maybe this is something for next year, but understanding the outflow of each, I guess, service area into EOC, not just the total that came into EOC would be useful for me, just.
Yeah, there's different ways we could do that. We don't do that currently, like check which cost center is spending the most time on the EOC. But there is mechanisms that we could look at if that's something the board wants to see in the future. Right now, it's just everything is within emergency planning because that's where the revenue is.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm picking on that one in particular, trying to wrap my head around what do we actually need for emergency planning in particular, because that seems like it's going to be a growing concern. Thank you.
I don't see any hands on the screen. See any hands here around the table?
Jenna just put her hand up.
Jenna Stoner, go ahead.
Thanks. Vice Chair, I was going to ask a question on an item that you have previously declared a conflict of interest on. So before I raise it, I'm going to give you the opportunity. It's around remuneration for the chair and the vice chair. And
so I should remove myself? Is that
If you previously.
And we wrestle for the chair?
You actually have to choose amongst yourselves who will be the chair in my absence.
I nominate Mike because he doesn't want to do it. Dang.
You better not want to speak. Go ahead, Director Stoner.
thanks. I just wanted to get clarification with the board. So at the December Policy Development and Review Committee, we had been tasked with reviewing. You folks may remember that there had been some revolving discussions around updating remuneration for directors and around the board. And we had decided to include a more fulsome remuneration review in this year's budget, which has been included. But there was a resolution by the committee to consider for the 2024 budget to increase the remuneration for the chair and the vice chair because they were grossly out of line with the early assessment that the staff had done in terms of median remunerations for chairs and vice chairs across 10 different regional districts. I think that there was, my question to staff is, I don't know if that actual recommendation from that committee got back to the board from the December meeting, or if it got back in time to the board in time to action for the 2024 budget. So I'm just seeking clarification on the timing and if we might be able to still consider that request to up the remuneration for the chair and the vice chair in this budget cycle.
Through the chair. So I asked the same questions and reached out to CAO Gilmore about that. It didn't flow from the December Policy and Development Committee into the board meeting. It was a miss. So I just wanted to make sure there wasn't a purposeful delay to it. So it was a miss, which means it didn't actually flow into finance being aware of it in order to build it into the budget. However, it's looking at the entire general budget, it's a nominal amount. It can be covered in this year. What the next steps would be a quick update of the remuneration bylaw with those numbers that are specified in, because the recommendation to the board is very specific numbers and dollar amounts. That would be updated and then accepted, approved as the recommendation from the policy and development. So we're not hingering, we do have room in general to cover this. It's not specific to that line item. However, in general, it can be covered, no problem. So
Okay,
this-
and I don't want to presuppose that the full board will accept that recommendation from the committee, so I'm assuming that resolution or that motion would come before the full board at the next meeting, is that correct?
Yeah, I think if everyone's okay with this, my recommendation would be that the updated bylaw come to board for approval that includes those numbers. We won't do any other work on the bylaw. It would just be a very focused, here's the new numbers and accept that. Otherwise, it would be accepting the recommendation of the recommended and then directing staff to update the bylaw. I think just in the consideration of time and because this is missed, that would be the recommendation.
So that would be when the rest of us are clued into as to what's going on right now.
Oh.
Because those of us that aren't on the committee have not known.
Scrolling through, I missed something
So
here.
the information that Director Stoner's referring to, when does that get brought to the board as part of?
Yes, okay. So I wasn't sure, because I did my own research because I wasn't here in December. There was does everyone want some more background?
Is there an enclosed component to this before we go any further?
No.
I don't think
This
so.
wasn't spoken about enclosed previously?
No,
Okay, just want to make sure.
no.
I think my proposal would be that the recommendation from the committee come forward on the next regular board meeting agenda for full board endorsement. And then staff could go, if it is endorsed, then staff could go away and do the update to the remuneration bylaw. But appreciate that there are folks in the room who don't really know what we're talking about. Although it was in the committee meeting minutes, so if you read the fulsome agenda packet, I technically approved the minutes.
Director Crompton?
I'm just confirming what you, through the chair, Director Stoner is suggesting that we'll approve a budget that has capacity to do this if we decide to do it. Okay, I understand this. I'm comfortable.
Yeah. So that's just coming forward, or do we need a motion to bring that forward?
Through the chair, I think we don't need a motion because this morning we've already directed the fuel. The existing fuel that was missed.
Okay. Does that cover your concerns, Director Stoner?
Yeah, thank you for that.
Really, how you get it done, Jack?
Really well, Chair.
Yeah, dude, I can give you a masterclass in that.
I think
I have to make a motion.
It's like the interim chair gets a raise too.
I think I'm gonna make a motion that we take Russell's pen.
Yeah. So moved, so moved.
Obviously having way too much fun here.
Okay, so we're at adjournment, Chair.
Well done. I think they turned it over to you, didn't they? Well, are we are gonna adopt the regional district 2024?
We haven't called the question.
All right,
We just discussed that.
okay, so
So there's, it's to receive.
So we would receive the regional budget changes and details 2024-2028 financial plan.
So moved.
By Director Herford, seconded by Director Mack. Is there anyone opposed? Seeing none. Report received. And then we're moving on to weighted all vote. Bylaw number 1860-2024 cited as Squamish-Lillooet Regional District 2024-2028 financial plan bylaw number 1880. Why did I start reading this?
Yeah.
We're gonna have it be introduced and read a first, second, and third time. Moved by Director Crompton, seconded by Director Mack. Anyone opposed?
Just well done again. I think this is a good process. Pleased with it.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. Motion is
Sorry,
carried.
you got Councilor, or sorry, Director Stoner.
Director Stoner, thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair, just want to note, it's always momentous, I think, when we get through budgeting on time. as per our legislated requirements. So thanks to staff for doing the heavy lifting. I think there were some staff transitions through CAO throughout this process. And so perhaps a little bit more shorter than we typically do in terms of seeing the first budget. But I think it was a robust process, and at least I get more familiar with it every year. And so it feels a little bit easier, but it's still a pretty daunting task at the regional district level. But I do really appreciate staff's efforts, incremental efforts over the years to try and make the information more accessible, more digestible to those of us around the table, and continue to look forward to a time when we have a bit more capacity to do that for external audiences as well. Because I do recognize it is difficult both to deliver this information in a way that is digestible, but there's also, I think, an interest and a demand for that from our residents. Do want to note that there are some substantive percentage increases within these budgets that can sometimes feel overwhelming, but on a percent per 100,000 assessment, it actually doesn't work out to be all that much. And I think that they're really important investments that we've chosen to make as a board over time, and making sure that this organization is more resilient and robust to the changing conditions and the growing demands that are being asked of our communities. So I just want to thank my board colleagues and staff for a really robust financial planning workshop for this year, and investing in this organization so that we can continue to do good work for the year to come. Thanks.
Well said, Director Stone. And Director Pettigill, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just to, I think, echo a lot of what Director Stoner said, and acknowledge too, the percentage increases are a bit scary, but when you look at the per assessment dollar, it seems much more reasonable, especially given the demands that the community has, and quite legitimate things we need to do. We've I think as a board identified we need a bit more capacity to meet those demands, and I think we will see, I hope we will see a lot more capacity than sort of more than one body's capacity for every person we add, just because we're dealing with people overloaded so much that I think as we fill in those gaps, we should see much more productivity, and to acknowledge that staff are working very well with the capacity they have, but it's maybe a bit too much for the staff. So I'm glad to see us supporting those changes. And then the other thing that I've raised a few times, and I think people will be bored of me saying it, but just really interested over the next year in really understanding our emergency capacity needs. And I am sort of wondering a little bit if we haven't underspent on that, just given what we've seen for the last few years. But I know that'll get a lot of attention over the next year, and maybe that's in the next budget where we really dig into that funding wise. And then for me, I do wonder if there's a way where we could at least start with a little less detail, sort of higher level, and hopefully that would give staff a bit of relief as well. There is a lot of information to dig into, and I wonder at times if we're getting too far below our sort of governance role with some of the detail in there. But overall, I really appreciate the information and the way it was presented to us, and so thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Demare.
I just want to thank the finance department, for all the sessions that we've had on parcel taxes for individual community services and the shared services that we have in the Northern SLRD. And I know how much time it takes to make that happen, and I appreciate it. I think we came up with a pretty good plan. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that as well for your extra efforts for some of the Northern finance.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate hearing all these, because it is a lot of work, and the story is constantly changing. It's one day to the next. It's a new budget. So just like I just found out yesterday about the changes to the policy committee, so it's a point in time where it's a budget that's, you know, and then and when we do an amendment, say there's a change, I will update those salaries and make sure all those other changes are in the budget. But when there's a material change, basically. Thanks again.
Virtual bouquet of flowers to you. Now we have
Without being able to walk.
Yes, yeah, in spite of some things working against you too. We now have a weighted 2/3 majority vote to adopt.
It was just moved and seconded,
It was.
the first one.
Okay,
Because
so
we
we haven't
haven't
voted
carried
on
the
the
first
first one.
resolution.
We better do that. Anyone opposed? Seeing none. First, that is carried, and now we'll do
I'll move the next one.
adoption.
Adoption, yep.
Thank you, Director
I'll
Wilson,
second.
seconded by Director Demare. Is there anyone in opposition? Questions, comments? Seeing none, motion carried. Thank you very much. Heritage Conservation Service. Welcome, Vanessa. Really? Yeah, I do. Broken down
I'm Veronica Reed, the Project and Program Coordinator. Through the chair, we're here to provide a quick summary of our report, which is actioning a resolution from the September 2022 board meeting to draft an amendment bylaw for the existing electoral area A heritage conservation bylaw and draft bylaws to establish heritage conservation services for areas B and C. The amendment to A is to allow greater flexibility and to mirror the cost recovery approach in the existing area D and will align with area B and C. And note, as provided in our report, that services related to heritage conservation, a maximum annual requisition is not required. So therefore, the 3 bylaws do not contain a maximum requisition.
And hello, Raylene Rehill, Legislative Co-Coordinator. Through the chair, the board has indicated its support that all 4 electoral areas of the SLRD have heritage conservation service establishing bylaws. And as Veronica had said, such bylaws are already in place for electoral area A and area D. If the board approves the 2 new bylaws proposed for electoral area B and C, the SLRD will have consistency across all 4 of its electoral areas. And there are substantial heritage assets in the region. There is a need for an effective approach for heritage management. So regarding next steps, if the board selects option 1, which is to approve the recommendations as presented, staff will obtain the written consent of electoral area A, area B, and area C, and then forward the associated bylaws to the Inspector of Municipalities for approval. And once the inspector approval is obtained, staff will then bring the bylaws back to the board for consideration and adoption. Thank you. Staff is available for questions now.
Thank you. Welcome questions, Director Matt.
I was going to move option 1 as presented.
I'll second it.
All right. I see a question from Director Stoner.
I was just curious if I read the report right, that we don't actually need to set a requisition limit for these service establishment bylaws. And if that's the case, then is that an exemption for them through the Heritage Management Act?
Yes, through the chair, you are correct.
Interesting. Thank you.
I had a comment and a question. When I first was reading it, I thought there's a omission of referencing the Statland, for example, in area B, but then when I looked at the content, I saw it right at the top. So there it is, the acknowledgement. I was wondering about Crown land. Is this inclusive of Crown land for heritage sites?
Sorry, there are other staff also here to answer questions. I might defer.
So Ms. Needham, I everyone's looking at you.
We don't really regulate crown use of crown land.
Okay.
And I'm not actually sure off the top of my head if there are any heritage resources on crown land. It's like Director Tamara might know though.
I can think of a couple to be.
Yes, there is
Right.
Mento City. On the Gulf. And that's a provincial heritage site. And I know I'm working with Alex McKay on that one.
And there were some fabulous sites up at the K, Squilex history that they are no longer. Director Pettigill?
Sorry, we're at comments now? If I,
Where,
I have a comment.
please.
Okay, yeah, supportive of this, I was a bit, whenever I see heritage, I get a bit antsy about, oh, whose heritage are we talking about and all that sort of thing at this point in time, so. I understand this is just the funding mechanism and, you know, soon conversations like I think we're having tomorrow and so on, we'll get to dig into the what is the heritage piece we're focusing on, which I think is important.
Any other questions or comments?
Just like to make a point of clarification, through the chair, the exemption is through the Local Government Act. And that's just a point of clarification directed to Director Stoner, please.
Okay, thank you. Call the question then. All in favor? And anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carried for the first three now. And then there's quite a few more of that.
So moved.
The next three that's are moved by Director Crompton, seconded by Director Blunt. Leaving us with two that's. C, 1, 2, 3 for area C. Moved by Director Mack. Seconded by Director Demare. Anyone opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had questions on this, but I phoned Ms. Allen and the answer. And I see Lee Allen is being in. Welcome. Looking at the SLRD ticketing system bylaw notice. Would you like to make any comments, Sally? And have you got a question?
I do have a question.
Are you with us, Lee?
Which is connecting to audio, it's taking
Ah,
quite a
okay.
while. I think there may be some technical issues happening.
So we'll just take a minute because Ms. Needham's here. Back out. Would you like to lead in, Kim?
Yeah, through the chair, I can just add that, we update this bylaw from time to time when we change other bylaws, and basically this just sets fees for all of our zoning bylaws, for fine amounts that we can give on the notices. So this is just an update, and I believe we're gonna be back again next month. If the 7.7 goes through, we'll probably be updating this again to include some new fines for some of those pieces, so. Yeah.
Someone like to move this?
I just had a question, and I believe through the district anyway, there's two types of provincial regulations, and one is more restrictive on the fees we can charge, and the other one's less. But I guess to my point, relative to the offenses, which seem to be, building on properties which might be very expensive, very expensive buildings, the fee amounts seem very small, and so I'm just wondering, are these useful and effective fees, or is it sort of moot because the province is dictating a max anyways? And
Yeah, I believe the max is $500, and so Yeah, we do our best to get the fees we can, let's just put it that way.
And is Lee's audio not working? Okay. Okay, yep, Dr. Hopful.
So I just have a question, through the chair. Under Schedule A, and 4.5.2, the unpermitted use of parcel as salvage, junk, or wrecking yard. Does that basically mean if there's like 6 or 8 derelict vehicles there, is that it's using that use? And staff permitting, are we looking into that, or is that complaint based?
Through the chair, all of our bylaw enforcement is complaint based, unless staff stumble upon
Okay.
some issues, yeah.
I was curious about the definitions of early payment and a compliance agreement discount, just so I could hear that information.
Miss Allen appears to be there, so she might be able to speak to that because she's dealt with that before.
We've actually never had anyone ask for the compliance agreement. But yeah, it's in place for quite a few different offenses where they get a certain timeline to bring the property into compliance, and yeah, it's a significant discount, but no one has actually asked for the compliance agreement yet.
Okay, thank you. See a question from Director Stoner.
Thank you through the chair. And this is always one of the risks when you do some of these updates, you have people starting to read the details. But I was just curious. So also in Schedule A, Appendix 19, so this is for electoral area B, home business use contrary to regulations is a fine of $475, but home industry use contrary to regulations is $450. And bed and breakfast use contrary to regulations is $450. So I was just curious why the variability in some of the rates, because it feels like it's not consistent.
The fine rates for any of the new amendments that I added in there were used for the comparative rate for which might have been from another area, but that's actually where the fine amounts came in. If it was a new one, I looked to see what was charged for the same similar offense in a different area.
Any questions for Scott? Thank you. It's nice to see you. Please. And would someone like to move it to first that? Be read a first, second, and third time. Director Hopful, second by Director Morgan. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carried. And for the second one, we need a 2/3 majority vote that the bylaw be adopted. Moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Hopful. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that's carried as well. And now we're moving on to electoral area B agricultural zoning update.
You're gonna play music, you should play for all the.
No, this is special. This one has been on the book since I came on the board.
How long was that?
It's been quite, there's been 6 CAOs and a couple of maternity leaves have come and gone. We're going to have a celebratory lunch after this, in the event that this is passed. Is there staff to speak to it? No? Alex is with us. Ah. Oh, Alex. From far away.
Hi, so through the chair, I won't give a presentation or anything at this stage, but basically this bylaw was referred to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure following the board meeting in February. They approved it very quickly and it's now back before the board for consideration of adoption, and staff are recommending that the bylaw be adopted at this time. And obviously I'm happy to take any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Are there any questions? Yes, Director Matt?
Move it.
Ah.
Oh, we got names.
I'll second.
Is there anyone opposed? Okay. I am very happy to say that this is adopted and thank you very much.
Now you'll get a free lunch.
Work. Yes, and we look forward at the AAC in Area B to have lunch later in April and celebrate this. Thank you. Okay. Staff report is another business. CAO verbal update.
Hi, everyone. Heather Paul, CAO. So a few updates to share with you. One of them will require a motion, which is about the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District is convening a regional affordable housing forum on Thursday, April 18th, 2024 at the Squamish-Lillooet Cultural Center in Lakewood, BC. The forum is going to take place from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. It is anticipated there will be about 60 attendees with participation from elected officials and staff, First Nations, District of Squamish, RMLW, Village of Pemberton, District of Lillooet, SLRD, and select community industry representatives, as well as BC Housing, Worcester Housing, and Squamish Housing. It is hopeful that some SLRD board members attend. For that attendance, we would require a motion to support the expenses of that attendance. So a motion to support their attendance. I think one of the clarifying would be which directors would be attending. I know that Director Hoffel and Director DeMar have put forward interest. And just a point of clarity, that you would be attending as a representative of the SLRD.
Sorry, a question. I think I saw a calendar invite. I thought it looks great and I said yes. Is this something if we can attend even if we're not the official representative or?
Yeah, as District of Squamish, you can attend and it would be the District of Squamish that would cover your expenses.
It's just expensive. Oh, just an expense.
Just an expense.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
Sorry about that, gang.
Yeah.
Just kind of marrying two things. One, to make sure everyone knows about it, and then of course to cover these.
Director Crompton?
My assumption would be that it would be the chair or the vice chair that would be officially representing the SLRD at a meeting like this, no?
I know that I am not attending this. I don't believe Jen is attending this.
Just like
Yeah.
the procedure, what is,
Well, we were all invited.
The invite went
Right.
yeah.
So the invite went out, I think, part of the, which maybe Director Needham could clarify, the invite went out, but some of it would be also as your seat, as you represent your municipality or regional district. Or alternatively representing the SLRD board. I don't know what chair board has decided on this one.
I mean, I'll vote in favor of whomever, like, if we're just talking about costs, I'll vote in favor of people attending. That's not what I'm suggesting, but I'm just thinking, I think our procedure is that the chair would represent the SLRD if we're talking about representation at a public event.
We could delay this, but what we can do is cover the expenses in a resolution afterwards and clarify, point that out.
I just make a resolution to cover the costs of any member of this board that wants to attend.
That would be helpful.
Maybe that doesn't have municipal funds available too, so really it's the area directors
And chair.
and chair.
Yeah, so it would be, yeah, that's a good motion. I'll move any electoral areas and the chair have their costs covered by the regional district.
Good motion.
That's a second.
Sorry, just a question.
Oh, and
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I want to capture that we have, just the area covered here is so vast, which we deal with all the time in all of our pieces. Our friends from Lillooet might, perhaps we want to support that as a board rather than lean on the municipality for that extended travel for essentially the regional district focused function. So how do we capture that?
Sure, I mean, I think the first one then is the one that makes the most sense. Cover the cost of any member of this board that would like to attend, and then those of us that have municipalities that will cover it, we can go to them for that cost.
I can go to the RMOW to cover my costs.
Definitely not.
You can certainly go to the
Thanks for trying to clarify.
So that's been moved.
The date of that again was?
April 18th at the Squamish-Lillooet Cultural Center from 9 till 3.
And I'll second.
Seconded by Director Herford. Call question, anyone opposed? That motion is carried. Good. Yes.
I thought it was clear though, and now, so we've talked about who's representing, and I think that's clear, it's the chair who's paying for it, that's sort of sorted out, but can anyone attend who got the invite, or it's only the representative can attend?
No, you can.
Anyone can attend, okay,
Anyone
okay.
that got the invite.
And I do believe that you are welcome and encouraged to.
You want to consider a motion whether Chris can attend?
And the bylaw, like our covering expenses states that those attending where the SLRD is covering expenses is there in the interest of the SLRD. That's just our procedural.
You probably thought this was the least complicated.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go to the next one. So I need a resolution on my next up there. At the request of the board, the host board meetings in electoral areas, it is being proposed that the May meeting will be hosted in Area D. If there's any interest in that, the resolution would be that the regular SLRD board meeting scheduled for May 22nd and 23rd, 2024 be moved from the SLRD boardroom at 1350 Astor Street in Pemberton, BC to Ford Creek Golf and Country Club at 150 Country Club Road in Ford Creek, BC.
Moved by Director Herford, seconded by Director Demare, and is this a question, Chris?
Yeah,
Yep.
just, do we have to worry about streaming and all that, and if so, is that an issue that we're concerned about, or that's easy, no problem?
Preliminary investigation has shown that it shouldn't be a problem. This motion will give staff capacity to really go dig into that. Stress test it.
Actually, on that point, even though I moved or seconded this, if I could, just being held in area D, is that a better motion? So if there's an alternate needed, an alternate location to be proposed because technical issue or something, we have to come back to the board for. Like, we leave staff to select and the area director to select the exact location if it needs to be, actually do it.
Through the chair, that's a very good question. Part of our notice requirement is around it being the specific location.
I know that that's needed at some point, but do we
Yeah.
need that in our, doesn't feel to me like we need that in our motion so that staff can be responsive if they unearth some issues with this. The sort of the first choice and maybe we've done the list, but perhaps I'm overly complicating a simple thing, but I want to make sure that there's not a delay. Because of.
Thank you for the question. We've done preliminary scan of all of the different areas within Area D. The one that meets our technical needs is this location.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that clarification, question? No. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Anyone opposed to that motion? Motion carried. Okay.
Thank you. So, one more update.
Good.
Which is update on the board on 2 scheduled town hall meetings. The SLRD's plan for participation and managing questions. The province's virtual town hall meetings on the post-wildfire natural hazard reports for the Casper Creek and the downtown wildfires. Town hall dates are as follows. Casper Creek post-wildfire natural hazard risk assessment town hall will be April 3rd, 2024 from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. PST. Downton Lake post-wildfire natural hazard risk assessment will be April 4th, 2024 from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. PST. The SLRD has shared the province's letter publicly on the SLRD website, the recovery webpage, and social media. Staff will continue to support the Ministry of Forests and Ministry of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness in their planning efforts for these town halls. The SLRD has been advised that the province will be holding this using a webinar function, that questions from webinar viewers in the public will be submitted through the chat function and then directed to the appropriate representative for concern. At this time, the expectation is that I will be the SLRD's representatives with the 3 to 4 subject matter experts, including Director Phillips, Director Needham, and Building Inspector Mr. McEwen, will be available to be called on for any submitted questions that are within the SLRD's jurisdiction.
Sorry, where is the information for that, the Casper Creek one?
It is on the website, the recovery webpage, and social media. I don't have the link here, but it has been posted to the website. One of the hurdles was the province had a hurdle communicating with the public. So our request was if we were going to host it, that they provide the letter. It is them hosting it, so they provide the letter on their letter. And it also, with this notice, will be going out via newsletter to the recovery groups.
Director Demaire.
Once again, I want to thank staff for making this happen. It's important that, you know, that the province actually disseminates these reports so people can understand them. They're very technical and hard for some of the people to disseminate what it actually means. So this is going to be good. Thank you. I'll be attending both.
I plan to attend both as well. And are there other comments? Is there another update? Another update, CAO?
Yeah, I do.
Yes, you do.
But I'm gonna wing it, it's on my notes. There was a tabletop exercise for the Emergency Operations Center, which took place about 2 weeks ago, Thursday prior to, so Thursday the 14th of March. About 150 people participated, including Village of Pemberton, District of Squamish, Lillooet Nation, Squamish Nation, the SLRD, and the Resort Municipality of Whistler. It was an exercise conducted by external consultants that were professionals in this area. All emergency communication also included a group of people in their own absconded areas, which were receiving and giving calls. So we weren't calling the RCMP wasn't calling us. Someone with a script would call. And it was very well controlled and also avoided any miscommunication of not an emergency happening. The participation was wonderful to view. As mentioned, I was incredibly impressed with the SLRD staff who took this as an opportunity not to exercise their own professional designation in EOC, but rather to coach all staff who are interested in that at any role. The Human Resources Department participated with the EOC, with the emergency management teams in advance to ask what staff were interested in which roles, and were able to share that opportunity with the staff. There were some incredible moments of shining authority and decision-making that happened with people who the consultant said, I don't believe you've never done this before. So that was quite a wonderful exercise. For me to witness it was a good practice, and for everyone to have it when it isn't an emergency and have those skills trained was also incredibly valuable. I recommend it happening every year, outside of it actually being a real case. Yeah, I think that's, unless there was a closing, the only thing we did outside of the consultant's recommendations was have a wrap-up meeting with any directors who were able to join from the policy committee, and we ended it with that. I think it was impressive all around watching the regional coordination and all the other municipalities and groups and interested parties working together, including Search and Rescue, Ministry of Forests, Ministry of Transportation. So I commend everyone and would like to say, when the first call started with everyone online, it was a hybrid of in-person and online. I was shocked on how many people were involved in this exercise. It was very thorough, and it aligns with the province's goal to have a more regional coordination. And we were able to see the opportunities for improvement, and we were really strong.
Well done.
I just want to recognize everyone who participated, including the emergency management services director and managers and staff who took a lot of time to coordinate that.
Well done. To receive the CAO report, please direct Matt, the third one. Does anyone oppose? Seeing none, motion carried. Now it is 2:33 left for the mayor. Were you going to go on the call with?
Geez,
Would you
already.
like to excuse yourself?
Yeah. You're right. See if we can find a room.
Oh, so no doubt Mark is listening in. Right?
Time flies.
When you're having fun. So now we're on Britannia Beach. 3. Okay, good. Here and Anna will be in.
No, I don't think Anna will be here.
We're looking at EDP application number 178. Did you want to say anything, Ms. Needham, or no? Okay, and I see Director Richmond.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty minor variance to me, and it's well laid out in the report, so I'll move the recommendation from staff.
I had a quick question.
Sure.
If that's okay
Yes,
before we get there, or sorry, do you as well? Or-
Yeah.
In the report, it says, sorry, I was gonna get it right in front of me here. It said that it seemed to read like here it is. That the setbacks had changed at some point throughout the process. Am I reading that correctly? Like it was 3.5 at the time, and then it's since then in the zoning bylaw, we have a larger setback. I just wondered what, am I reading that correctly, or?
Yes, I believe there was a point when there was a zoning amendment that put this offside.
So I'm wondering what the rationale for that change, given that it was adopted by the board, that seemed like a reasonable thing to do, to increase these setbacks. And now we're being asked to vary them again. So I just want to make sure that we're like, I'm trying to figure out the consistent rationale for I guess where we are with this recommendation.
Yes, sorry, I don't have that rationale with me. I think that amendment was probably made about 2016 or 17. It's 0.6 of a meter, so 60 centimeters, and staff don't see this as being a concern. No neighbor concerns were heard either.
Director Pettingill.
Yeah, I assume it is consistent, but I just sort of want to ask, is this aligns with height and lot coverage and everything between the two units?
Yes. And I think it's also important to note that with these new amendments that we're doing, because of the Bill 44 legislation with the small scale and multi-unit housing, we're going to be bringing bylaws in April that are going to be reducing setbacks all around as per provincial site standards recommendations. So you're probably going to be seeing a lot fewer variances coming forward as a result of those changes that the province is mandating.
So just to that point, I mean,
it's sort of portrayed a little bit as an accessory dwelling unit, but when I looked at it, there's like multi-levels of pools and it looks like two mansions on a lot that's maybe too small for two mansions. And so I'm like wondering if a setback is maybe going a bit far in this case, or a setback reduction. Just because, which is different than I think Bill 44, which seems to imply more smaller fourplexes on a lot and getting more of that, you know, multi-unit density, as opposed to this seems like a kind of a different thing.
I believe, and I may be wrong, because we haven't finalized everything, but Bill 44 is recommending as low as 1.5 meter side yard setbacks for accessory dwelling units. They've really reduced the numbers. And it's something that we don't have a lot of say in. So I think we're going to be seeing more and more accessory dwelling units that are within 1.5 meters, you know, of property lines.
Any other questions? It's been moved and not seconded. Yep, seconded by Ms. Warden. Any opposition? One opposed, Director Penningill. And three, okay, motion carried. Thank you. Correction of name. A funding request by La Joie Lake Residents Association. The following resolution is passed, and so and so. So the name was wrong on the check. And we need to have a new resolution for funding of $7,500 be granted to La Joie Lake Residents Association, the Committee of the Bridge River Valley Community Association from Electoral Area A, BC Hydro Payment in lieu of Taxes Reserve Fund to support their aeration project payable to the Bridge River Valley Community Association. First we have to rescind the first one. Sorry, I was blathering on there. I need to rescind the first one. Motion to rescind by Director Pettingill, seconded by Director Richmond. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion is rescinded. Would someone like to move that we pass the second that? Director Matt, Director Pettingill, anyone opposed? Seeing none, that motion is carried as well. So we'll wait for Mary Lou, and here comes Director Beth. Mary Lou, welcome. Thank you. We're on the information report, solid waste and resource management plan, the 5-year effectiveness review.
I'm Marie Lou, Resource Recovery Coordinator for the SLRD. My understanding is we'll go and jump right to question and answers.
Very good report, thank you. Are there questions from board members? I'm not seeing any hands on the screen. Director Buckle.
I had a question, bear with me here. Does Goldbridge, now having a transfer station and bringing their disposables to Lillooet, have anything to do with increased tonnage for us?
No, the amount of waste in Goldbridge is it's been consistent over the years. My understanding with the increased amount in Lillooet is just the amount of construction renovation that it's been going on in the last few years. But it's been quite consistent, and we're seeing a decrease of tonnage total being landfilled, and a little bit of increase in terms of diversion. So recyclables, metal, appliances. So
another question, if I could, was just, is there still going to be input on how the service is working, like with metals? Because currently you can dispose of your metals there and there's a fee that you pay to do that. But then it's the contractor that actually takes the metals and kind of has a side business, I think, so to speak, to turn in that metals. And I would like to see the SLRD capture that revenue instead. Now, I don't know what the cost would be to figure that out about transporting metals, but I would think that there's obviously some sort of revenue source there. So I'm just wondering if that's still something that we can talk about at a later date.
Yeah, and I can speak to that. So through the board, in the past, like many years, it is correct. The current contractors always been managing the metal. One of the reasons was it's always tricky. We never know if we're going to be making money on metals or if we're going to be spending money on metals, depending on the market. And they're always been great to work with. I never had to spend any time. There was like no staff time involved into organizing that. Last year, for the first year, because of the wildfire, the SLRD took over the metal at the Goldbridge transfer station. And to be honest, it was quite a bit of staff time involved. But that will be what we're going to do moving forward as we move to a different contractors as of September 1st. So yes, SLRD will be taking that on, and we will be managing the metal and having the benefit or the loss, depending on the year and on the market for metal.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
And I see Director Stoner, his question.
Thank you through the chair. Thanks to staff for this great update. It's interesting to see the collective work across the region on waste reduction and some of the persistent challenges. I have a few questions. My first one is just in terms of, in the staff report, it says that the board accepted the current plan in 2016, and it wasn't approved by the province until 2019. So my question is, why was there such a lengthy delay with the province? And then my second question is, if we're required to update it every 10 years, does that put us at 2026 or 2029 for a requirement for renewal?
Yeah, so through the chair, we spoke to the province about the 3 years that it took to get this approved. My understanding, it was staff, but the SLRD was the only regional district that saw such a delay in terms of like between staff sending to the ministry and getting the approval. I've been working with the ministry in terms of working through that years, like the 5 years review and then the 10 years update. So we decided to do an update, a review this year because it changed so much since when we first started to work on that report, which is 2013. And we will start the update next year for a 2018 update, full update. So it would be 9 years, not quite 10 years between the approval from the ministry and us sending it up like a full update.
Okay, just to follow up on that, one of the pieces of feedback through the interviews that we saw was actually a recommendation to not proceed with an update given the staff capacity and the reality that there's components in the plan that haven't been implemented. And while a lot of the context has changed, we kind of still know what we need to do. And so I'm just curious about staff's rationale for continuing to push for a review or a more fulsome update of the plan in 2025 as opposed to postponing for a year or two.
Yeah, so my understanding is the recommendation was to do a review basically for 2028, but we know it takes at least 2 years, if not 3. So with staff starting next year, it gives us like a 3 years to get like a full update by 2028. And in that meantime, still working on what we need keep working on to make progress on that current solid waste plan that we have.
Okay, I'll mull on that. My last question was just around the Squamish landfill, and I'm curious if there's been discussions in the past or recently around that becoming an SLRD operation. It's one of the things that we typically see managed by a regional district. And I noticed in the report that both Whistler and Pemberton are now, when they used to send their landfill waste to the District of Squamish landfill, is no longer possible, and they've been sending it to there goes my dog. They've been sending it on to Washington or Capital. So I'm just wondering if there's if there's been any discussion around the Squamish landfill becoming a regional asset.
It has not been discussed officially, I want to say, to bring the Squamish landfill as part of the original district facilities. We have constant conversation amongst Squamish staff and Western staff about the future of solid waste and what can be done at the original district, or even among the region, especially for the south, knowing that the Squamish landfill has such limited capacity, but it has not been officially discussed, or I have not received an official request from District of Squamish.
That's fair. Yeah, it just struck me as I was reading the report that there might be an opportunity there, especially as we start to pursue an expansion of the landfill. That's helpful. Thank you.
And through the chair, I can add that there's always conversation, especially with Whistler, between Whistler and Squamish, for the regional waste, knowing that most of the waste from Birkin area, Pemberton, go to Squamish, to Whistler, and then what would be the capacity if Squamish landfill was to expand? What would be the reality of accepting regional waste or not? So there's conversation on a regular basis.
Dr. Pettingill has a question?
Yeah, just sort of thinking in terms of the timing of a renewal and what stuff we're doing in the interim. And the report seeming to identify that capacity constraints in some municipalities have meant there's been different levels of success across the region. My sense is that in this particular area, the regional district is meant to sort of be in the leadership role. And so I'm wondering if we will be, maybe this comes in the renewal, but in the interim, sort of looking at whether we try as a regional district to fill in some of the capacity gaps.
Through the chair, yes, it's always a question, how can we fill the gap? What can be done? Where do we prioritize? Sometimes it's not as much as staff capacity as options available. For example, Pemberton, reuse or rebuild. It's way bigger than just regional district staff time to find options. It's also where can we find a space? Do we have local organizations that can take that on and support SLRD to run those a little bit like the same model as we see in Whistler and in Squamish as well? So sometimes it's just there's way more factors than just staff capacity. And I think that's where maybe the first solid waste management plan lack is really to highlight those areas where it's greater conversation. It requires more than just staff or budget. And for the north, because I don't want to dismiss the north, for the north, sometimes it's just options that are available to us, and are they financially feasible to increase diversion and to provide more options for residents in area A and area B and district of Q.
Thank you. Motion to receive the report from Director Crompton. Thank you. Seconded by Director Mack. Anyone opposed? Motion carries. And we're gonna move on to pitch-in week.
So moved.
So Luke, we can hear from Vanessa or just mean that we're going to follow the
Well, I mean, issuing proclamation.
proclamation?
We're doing this, yeah.
Okay, moved by Director Compton, seconded by Director Herker. Is anyone opposed? Excellent. So now will be our routine for kitchen week. And Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, Public Notification and Evacuation Relief Planning. Stream 2024. Welcome, Ms. Mr. Holmes.
Good afternoon. Principal Lester Holm, Director of Communications and Engagement with the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District. And I'm here today to answer any questions that the board may have with regard to the request for decision report that's in your agenda package, recommending that the SLRD apply for up to $30,000 through the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, in particular, the Public Notification and Evacuation Route Planning Stream. If successful, this grant fund, these funds would be used to develop a public notification and emergency communications plan for the SLRD. In recent years, we've had increased EOC activity. And when the EOC is active, we have a significant, there's a significant communications function for that role. We've implemented some great tools in recent years, including our Void Alert emergency notification system. And then during an active EOC event, we utilize our website and social media channels as well to disseminate that information. And then when we're not in an active EOC, we use those channels as well to share preparedness and related information to the communities. So we have those tools in place that help us communicate both during an emergency and outside of an emergency. But what we're lacking in is that overall plan that helps to direct that work. So typically when we're in an EOC activation, that communications function falls to the existing SLRD communications team. In recent years, we've been able to access some provincial funds on occasion to also bring in external contractors when we've had an extended EOC event that requires even more communications support than typical. And without the plan in place, we're lacking sort of that overall direction and templates that can help lead that work, but then also with the knowledge transfer, if we're building both internal capacity to train additional staff that can support in that communications function, and then also when we're bringing in external contractors. So the hope is that if the grant was successful, the grant application, we would then develop this plan that will help improve our effectiveness and efficiency both during an EOC activation and outside of that with regard to our communications efforts.
Excellent. Questions for staff? No? You're moving this, Jack? First, yeah, we have a question from Director Hoppel.
Through the chair, so we already have the Voyant and then we have the other tools of evacuation. So do we have a plan that we're expanding on? Or is it, like you said, the templates that we need?
Yeah, so we have the tools, we don't have the plan. So it would be an overall emergency communications plan that would also include templates to be used for the sharing of that information.
And when's it when does it close?
Soon, the end of April 24th, I believe.
Any questions? A motion to move the first to that from Director Mack, seconded by Director Hoxford. To develop the plan and provide staff time for grant management. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, motion carried. And then the Director of Communications and Engagement be authorized to sign the applications and so forth. Moved by Director Herbert, seconded by Director Pettingill. No one is opposed. Motion carried. Thank you, Patricia. Yes.
It still has to be here first.
So with your permission, we'll move to item 10 on your agenda. So that we can include Director Phillips and Director Demare in the items in between. So we'll come back to 8.8. And for now, we'll go to correspondence for action. Is that good, Angela?
That's fine.
Okay. So the first one is a referral for comment. Metro Vancouver Regional District Board. And for 2050 type B proposed amendment, City of Maple Ridge. Written comments by the deadline date of April 18th. Just gonna find that.
See,
Move received.
that's the reason.
And you're seconding the receipt. Is anyone opposed to moving receipt? Motion carried.
I'll do the same for the.
Similarly with the proposed amendments to reflect the electoral area A, that confused me for a minute, official community flag.
Second.
Seconded by Director Richmond. Is there any opposition? Seeing none, that is received. And the third one is the same, Director Crompton, Director Richmond. No opposition, received. So we're moving over to 10 votes. Minister of Emergency Management, now am I running out of?
That one, that's Mark as well.
Okay, you have to hold on that one. Wow, decision on late business.
May I suggest you go to perhaps the board roundtable, which is part of the generous voting.
Okay, you'll have to help me find my way back.
9.1.
So instead of doing. So we're just gonna go for the board roundtable. Excellent. We'll start with Director Richmond.
Okay, so we're talking about, you're talking growing community funds today, right? What was the idea of the roundtable today?
No, that is something that we do need to talk about.
Oh, I thought that's what
No, you're right. That is above the roundtable. Director Demare was particularly interested in that. Yes, Director Crompton.
I understand that he's interested, but the provincial thing is a call we could all be on and we're here, so I suggest that we just go through this process and I think you can watch it afterwards if you're interested in the video of it.
Fair enough. So, on the chair's verbal report, is this when I should report about some of the funding that we did receive? Yes. Sadly, although we put in some very good applications for the Rural Economic Development Initiative, REDIP.
Right.
Legion was declined, swims for our pool was declined, beautiful applications. But the hub, through gaming, they've received a significant grant to purchase the building in Area B. We put some money in on that too, and so did some other local donors. So that's all I have to do. That's your chair. Now, Growing Communities Fund, yes, the municipal projects. Can we start with Pemberton?
Sure, yeah, no, that's what I understood from the
Yes.
chair's email was that we were gonna do the board roundtable on that fund today, so. We at the village have not spent anything yet. We sort of put it to the side until we're finished our budget process, which we're inches away from finishing. We didn't want to consider these funds as a part of the budget process. We didn't want them to be considered to alleviate budget pressures because the budget is on its own and this should stand on its own. It was a feeling from council, but we didn't want to keep it till after budget because it might inform the conversation a little bit. So we haven't made that decision. We have a few things that are up for discussion. We have probably about an $8.5 million water treatment project that we want to accomplish in the next couple of years. We have a grant application in for about 5.8, which I'm feeling very optimistic about, which leaves $2+ million to be funded by the village. So one of the considerations is, instead of going to long-term borrowing on that project, is to use a chunk of the growing community fund to offset some of the residents' cost or the village's cost of that project. Again, nothing's been decided. In fact, this discussion is really yet to be had, but this is sort of what we've been bookmarking that for. So that could, although not necessarily sexy and fun, that could help alleviate a lot of the cost pressures on that really important project. There's other folks amongst council that feel that this should be used more towards projects that we definitely couldn't or wouldn't do without this fund. In other words, we need to do the water treatment. We should figure out how to fund it and perhaps use the growing community fund for other interesting projects around town that we've been wanting to accomplish but don't have cash or capacity. So yeah, we haven't decided anything yet. We got 2.7 million to work with. It might end up being a hybrid of what I just described, but those are the sort of competing pressures for that money is to offset the water treatment project, or to look at some other projects, infrastructure and otherwise.
Thank you. Mayor Ruthy.
Thank you. So the Squamish received the 6.3 million in the Growing Communities grant stream, and at this point, the plan is 3.6 million of that will be used to as the municipal portion of a grant that we've applied for to advance work at our Brennan Park Recreation Center. I guess for context, a brief context without going into too much about what's happening in Squamish. All of our facilities are essentially over capacity and end of life, and that's all. So when we've built new fire halls, we've built new, we're working our way through tackling the list, and of course, recreation is one of the main pieces there that the community expects when we think about facilities. But of course, I hope everyone in this room knows that we have public safety concerns that we're legislatively required to deal with, and that's very important for life safety reasons as well. So we've been tackling our facilities by prioritizing them from life safety pieces down to which are the must-haves, down to getting into the not just nice to have, but expectations of the community. So as we work through the list, and we've been through fire halls, our second fire hall is near completion. This piece will help advance work at Brennan Park. And I know there's been discussion around this table about the regional aspect of recreation facilities, so I won't go too far further into that in this conversation, but it's a critical part. It's a critical part of that project, and overall, I believe with all the grants come through and all the rest of it, we're kicking off a project that's in the neighborhood of $30 million renovation at our recreation facility, and this piece is this portion of the Growing Communities Fund is aimed to alleviate some of that financial pressure on the municipality. And then also in that sort of same sort of area, which is facilities, we've had some aggressive cost escalation in our public works building, or new public works facility that also, and of course, besides delivering water, sewer, looking after parks, roads, all that stuff, through that, we've seen some aggressive cost escalation. So at this point, the remaining amount, which I believe is $2.7 million, is proposed to be used to help with that, to ease the impacts of that cost escalation that we've seen. And we've seen more than $2.7 million in cost escalation on that project. So That's, that's how we're, where we are at this point in time on the growing communities fund spending in Squamish.
Thank you.
We're in a similar spot to Pemberton in that the decisions haven't really been made yet, though our public safety building expansion is a big part of that. Obviously, there's a lot of provincial regional police that work out of that space, and so the ability to police the municipality, but then also along the corridor is a big deal. And so it's likely that there'll be a significant portion of it invested to allow the growth of our policing effort in the RMW, but also regionally.
Now, do you think that constitutes a round table?
What about your couple? I think it, I mean,
Well,
yeah.
I know what's going on in the
I You turn to Heather, so do you think that the round table?
Awkward. My coffee level is really low. I'm trying not to drink so much caffeine and it's showing.
Go ahead, Mayor Hopper with apologies.
Well, we got 1.3 million and we used $60,000 for a report on the 7th Avenue drain, and we were going to put the rest of it into the drain, literally putting 1.3 million down the drain, right? But we have just done the report, and I think what we're gonna do is look ahead at the water distribution improvement program and our wastewater treatment plant. So multitude of things, and you don't need the whole list, but the pressure reducing valves, and there's nothing sexy about any of these things. A probe, clarifier tent, ventilation systems, heaters and sludge pumps, and I mean, really, it's money that we don't have to bring out of our budget. So it's we're grateful to have it, and it all helps, right? Can I add one more that's got nothing to do with this, but something that I really did want to share because it's on the round table? So again, right off the subject, but since last Saturday, I attended the 2nd annual Chamber of Commerce Business Gala Awards. So this is, and I was the, they said keynote speaker, let's say keynote address is what it ended up to be. And it was a black tie awards dinner with violins, and it was beautiful. It was all laid out in the rec center. The reason I wanted to share this is that the chamber acknowledged the SLRD a number of times in their round of thank yous for ongoing support of the businesses in and around Lillooet. And further to that, Pam Vilak, she's the emergency manager trainer. She also mentioned the SLRD a few times, and she recognized that in her speech, her support during the wildfires, or our support during the wildfires, the staff that helped out with the emergency management and everything they did. And I just wanted to share that with all of you, as sometimes it's the little things that take a lot of planning, time and work that staff, that residents to and around the region we don't always get to see. And when that recognition happens, especially when it's at a gala and it's only the people that are at that gala that actually hear that recognition, it's important that I share it with not only everybody at this table so that you can share it with the staff, but also it's a part of what the SLRD does, and it's important for the people to know that as well. So I just wanted to do that little share. It was a great night.
Thank you. And then just a footnote to that, Mark Phillips and I had planned to present our retiring Fire Chief Darren Oiki with a gift and a letter, the card he signed today. That's because Darren decided he'd just flit off to Nova Scotia and visit his daughter And I mean, good on him. He's retired as the fire chief. So Mark and I are gonna make a point when we have our round table at April 8th of trying to track him down. And Russell Mack was even gonna come up and join us because we all just really admire the work that Darren's done, but we're gonna pick that up a little bit later. Yes, but the outreach that was done by the SLRD during the emergency and the fires and the recovery of last summer was deeply appreciated. It was really felt, and that was nice. So, yeah, it's nice to pass the compliment back. Now, we'll decide what to do with this agenda. The recess would be excellent, but we're pretty close to finishing. You know, we could push what we have left over to tomorrow, right?
Really good. Yeah, that's good, yeah, actually.
And so tomorrow we'll start with finishing this agenda. Will it be all right with you? No, this is not all right with Angela. Stop.
Sorry, through the chair, it's not that it's not all right to defer to tomorrow, but we would start off the day with the people because it's scheduled to start at 9 o'clock and we do have a delegation at that time. So we go through the cow and then we move back into open to finish the business from today.
Love it.
For 10 minutes.
I think I never thought of a meeting right now.
Like, I don't-
It was canceled.
If we're waiting for Director Demare to finish the provincial meeting, this is gonna be going for another half hour.
I just got word that it should be over in 10 minutes. It was supposed to be over at 3:15. And it should be over.
We haven't started the Q&A.
They haven't.
No.
For what we have left here, we have a few pretty light items as far as I could see that could easily be handled at the end of the cow. So I'm supportive of that myself.
Me too.
Just from a scheduling perspective, the invites have been coming with an end at 3. So then plans sometimes are made elsewhere in the corridor for a time at like 4:30.
Well.
So I I want to make sure that we understand, and if we're not allocating the right amount of time, that's the time that I'm working with, so I'm sure that others are in that, maybe in a similar area, so. If we need to adjust the invites in the future, that'd be great, but I would love to be able to hold to step away at this point, so I can meet my other obligations.
All right, then, those remaining items, we will go over tomorrow after the whole meeting. Thank you.